couple, Terry and Larry, were diving with 3 others. Suddenly, Terry went completely still underwater. Their oxygen was running out faster than they had expected, and the dive was wearing them out. Their hearts were beating fast, and their muscles were aching. What makes this place so special isn't visible from the surface. The real magic and terror begins about 20 feet down. Divers who dive into the murky water discover something extraordinary. At the bottom, there's a massive 6-foot wide tunnel that looks like a giant drain. But this is no ordinary drain. It's an entrance to another world. The tunnel opens into what divers call the ballroom, an underground chamber so massive it's been compared to the size of an airplane hangar. Imagine floating in complete darkness, surrounded by rock walls that stretch beyond what your eyes can see. Some divers say it feels like being in outer space, suspended in absolute blackness. At the bottom of this enormous chamber, a sloped debris pile offers multiple tunnels to explore, 2 going downstream and 1 going upstream. Before any diver even thinks about entering, there's a sign that stops most people in their tracks. It's not just any warning, it's a chilling illustration of the Grim Reaper standing over fallen divers. The message is brutally simple. Stop. Prevent your own death. Go no further. The sign isn't just a suggestion, it's a stark reminder of the deadly risks that await. The requirements for diving here are extreme. You can't just show up with some diving experience. Divers must have full cave diving certification, hold a special Trimix gas certification for deep dives, have extensive experience in deep underwater caves. Ideally, dive with someone who knows this specific cave system inside and out. The history of Eagle's Nest is written in blood and tears. Take the heartbreaking story of a father and son who entered the cave on Christmas Day. Darren, an experienced diver, brought his 15-year-old son Dylan. They were excited about their new air tanks they'd received as gifts, but excitement quickly turned into tragedy. They descended 233 feet, a depth where the water pressure can play deadly tricks on the mind. Nitrogen narcosis began to take hold, making them feel drunk and disoriented. They lost track of time and began running out of air. Panic set in their final moments, they shared the remaining air, desperately trying to survive. But the cave showed no mercy. Both father and son perished. Darren found on the debris pile, Dylan near a spare tank. Another horrifying incident happened in 1981. A couple, Terry and Larry, were diving with 3 others. Suddenly, Terry went completely still underwater, her breathing regulator floating beside her. Larry tried desperately to save her, but failed. A nearby diving instructor, Jim Bentz, attempted a rescue, but also never resurfaced. Both were believed to have fallen victim to the deadly effects of nitrogen narcosis. What makes Eagle's Nest truly terrifying is how it can kill even the most experienced divers. Charles, a 55-year-old with 2 years of diving experience, died of a sudden heart attack at just 100 feet. Another experienced diver, named Davin, met with a similar fate while exploring the upper parts of the underwater chamber. The environmental challenges make everything even more dangerous. Visibility can change in an instant. One moment, the water might be slightly cloudy. The next, it can turn completely dark because of natural chemicals called tannins. Disturbing the cave walls can reduce visibility to 0 in seconds, turning an exploration into a potential death trap. The dive site's history is so dangerous that it was actually banned in 1999 due to multiple fatalities. The cave diving community fought hard and successfully convinced authorities to reopen it in 2003. Tragically, less than a year after reopening, another fatal incident occurred. The statistics are chilling. In the 30-year study of American cave diving deaths, Eagle's Nest accounted for approximately 8% of all fatalities. This is an extraordinary number, considering that there are hundreds of caves across the United States. The danger isn't limited to scuba divers. Free divers, those who dive without oxygen tanks, have also fallen victim to the sinkhole's deadly nature. In one incident, a 20-year-old named Sed attempted to break his personal depth record. He wanted to reach 80 feet on a single breath. His group watched him disappear into the darkness. When he didn't return, they tried to find him, but it was too late. His body was discovered 150 feet below the surface. The sign at Eagle's Nest carries a final, haunting message that captures its deadly allure. There's nothing in this cave worth dying for. Yet for some underwater explorers, the call for adventure remains irresistible. Despite the number of deaths, at least 13 confirmed since 1981, Eagle's Nest remains open to the cave diving community. It stands as a brutal testament to human curiosity, courage, and perhaps a touch of madness. Let's start with Jean-Claude's story in Font-Estremont, a big underwater cave system in southern France. This beautiful place has attracted many brave explorers. Jean-Claude and his brother Dumas, along with some other close friends, had been planning their trip to Font-Estremont for months. They were experienced divers and felt ready for the challenge. On the day of the dive, the weather was perfect and everyone was excited. As they went into the clear water, the sunlight quickly disappeared. They used their dive lights to see in the dark cave. At first, everything went well. They swam through the narrow passages, sudden drops, and cloudy water with no problems. They were going deeper into the cave than anyone had gone before. But as they went further, things got harder. The water got colder, the passages got narrower, and it became harder to see. What started as an exciting adventure was turning into a tough fight against the cave and their own tiredness. Even though it was getting harder, the team kept going. They thought they were about to make a big discovery, but they didn't realize how complicated the cave was or how tired they were getting. Their oxygen was running out faster than they had expected, and the dive was wearing them out. Their hearts were beating fast, and their muscles were aching. They decided it was time to turn back. But what should have been a careful return turned into a race to get out alive. In the dark, cloudy water, Jean-Claude got separated from the group. It happened so fast that the others didn't even notice until they were almost back at the surface. When they got out of the water, they realized with horror that Jean-Claude was still in the cave. Dumas, Jean-Claude's brother, made a tough decision. Even though he was very tired and low in air, he went back into the water to look for Jean-Claude. He swam through the dark passages, desperately searching, but the cave now seemed like a confusing maze, and each turn led him deeper into trouble. As Dumas' air was running out, he had to make the heartbreaking choice to go back to the surface without Jean-Claude. The next few days were filled with frantic searches, but they couldn't find him. Jean-Claude had vanished in the cave that he had wanted to explore. It took 3 years before anyone found out what happened to Jean-Claude. Another diver, exploring a far part of Font-Estremont, made a sad discovery. They found human remains, still wearing diving gear, stuck in a narrow crack deep in the cave. It was Jean-Claude. Finding Jean-Claude's body gave his family and friends some closure, but it also raised scary questions. How long did he survive in the dark? What was he thinking in his last moments? We'll never know the answers. Jean-Claude's story reminds us how dangerous cave diving can be. Even with lots of experience and careful planning, things can go wrong very quickly in underwater caves. Story number 2. Our second story is also about Font-Estremont, where another experienced diver met a similar fate. Mark Slousny, a Belgian adventurer known for doing daring things, came to Font-Estremont in June 2018. He was eager to explore its mysterious depths. Mark had done many extreme things before. He swam across the English Channel alone and set a record for high-altitude bungee jumping. Now, he was passionate about cave diving, and Font-Estremont was his biggest challenge yet. On June 28, 2018, Mark and his diving partner, Lauren Richard, got ready to go into the cave. As they entered the calm water hiding the cave's entrance, Mark was joking around, trying to keep relaxed. At first, the dive went well. Mark and Lauren swam easily through the dark, narrow channels. They knew what they were doing. Even when Mark's gear got caught on a sharp rock and tore, he quickly fixed the problem and kept going. But as they went deeper into the cave, the excitement started to wear off. The darkness seemed to close in around them, and the tight passages that were exciting at first now felt scary and dangerous. Eventually, they realized their oxygen was getting low. Lauren knew that it was time to go back, but Mark, always pushing limits, wanted to go further. He knew it was dangerous and against the rules of cave diving, but he couldn't resist. Lauren watched in shock as Mark waved goodbye and swam deeper into the cave. Lauren had to choose between following his friend and saving himself. He decided to go back to the surface alone, hoping Mark would realize his mistake and come back too. Mark kept going down, reaching an amazing depth of 380 feet, much deeper than they had planned. The water was colder here, the pressure was intense, and his air was running out fast. For a moment, he felt thrilled about pushing his limits, but then reality hit him. He had gone too far and needed to get back to the surface right away. Lauren waited anxiously at the surface, but Mark didn't come back. A rescue team quickly went into the cave to look for him, but the cave that Mark had wanted to explore now seemed determined to keep him hidden. Days turned into weeks, and still no sign of Mark. The rescue efforts were eventually stopped. It wasn't until 2 months later, in September 2018, that they finally found Mark's body deep in the cave. Many people in the diving community wondered if Mark was really ready for such a difficult dive. The same things that made him famous for extreme sports, his fearlessness and desire to push limits, may have led to his death. Story number 3. Our last story takes us to a different place, but one that's just as dangerous for cave divers. In Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, there's a cave system called Sacaktun. It's famous among explorers and scientists because it holds secrets about ancient history. On a sunny afternoon in 2017, 3 experienced divers got ready to explore Sacaktun. Their leader was a 33-year-old instructor who lived in the area. They had good equipment and felt confident, but they weren't very experienced with the special breathing devices they were using, called closed-circuit rebreathers, CCRs, especially in caves. The dive started well. The team easily swam through the first parts of the cave. They left guidelines behind them to help them find their way back in case of an emergency. After about 30 minutes, they came up in an air-filled chamber to rest and plan the next part of their dive. As they started the second part of their exploration, aiming for a section of the cave called the Cenote Nariz, they hit their first big problem. There was a very narrow part of the passage that was hard to get through with their bulky CCR equipment. They let the lead diver struggled to squeeze through, scraping his gear on the sharp rocks. Realizing how dangerous this was, the lead diver decided to turn back and find another way. This detour took up valuable time in air, but they eventually got back on track, reaching their planned checkpoint at 3:15 p.m. Here, the third diver in the group signaled that he had used up 1/3 of his air and needed to start going back. As the third diver headed back, the 2 others decided to keep going, determined to reach their goal. As they entered a deeper, more challenging part of the cave, the water got colder and the passages got narrower. The feeling of being alone and far from safety got stronger. Suddenly, the second diver noticed something was wrong. He turned to see the lead diver panicking, his eyes wide with fear. The lead diver was in serious trouble. His regulator, the device that gives him air, had gotten tangled in his gear. As he thrashed around desperately, the second diver faced a terrible choice. He knew that trying to help a panicking diver in such a tight space could lead to both of them dying. With a heavy heart, the second diver had to move away from his struggling friend. He watched helplessly as the lead diver fought for his life in the dark, cold waters of Sacaktun. The second diver started to swim back, feeling scared and guilty. On his way back, the second diver met up with the third diver of the team near one of their checkpoints. Together they made their way back to the surface, coming out at 4:52 p.m. with racing hearts and shaken spirits. Their leader, the man who had guided them into this dangerous dive, was gone. The next day, a recovery operation began. Local cave diving experts, along with police and other authorities, led the search. They quickly found the body of the lead diver, but they couldn't figure out exactly why he died. It looked like he might have gotten confused or disoriented, which probably led him to drowning, but they didn't know what caused this in the first place.
Sergey was not a typical adventurer, a 37-year-old husband and father. He was someone who lived for challenges. He'd already proven his love for pushing limits by participating in marathons and various extreme sports. But here was the critical detail that would ultimately seal his fate. He had only been caving twice before deciding to tackle one of the most challenging underground systems in the world. Something about the Veryovkina cave consumed Sergey's imagination. For nearly a year, he became obsessed. He collected information, studied maps, and gathered every possible screenshot and detail about the cave. Most people would have been completely deterred by the near-fatal expedition of the Perovo team in 2018, an incident where a massive flood nearly killed 8 experienced explorers. But Sergey was different. Where others saw danger, he saw challenge. What made his decision even more heart-wrenching was how he kept his plan secret. He told his wife he was going to find the meaning of life and would return in about a week. Little did she know that this would be the last time that she would see her husband alive. On November 1st, 2020, Sergey began his solo journey into the depths of the earth. The adventure started long before he entered the cave. The approach to the entrance was a challenging mountain climb that required specialized climbing crampons and trekking poles. He carefully packed his supplies in waterproof bags, anticipating wet passages, but critically, he did not bring waterproof clothing, a decision that would prove fatal. His preparation was minimal compared to professional expeditions, where the Prova team would use massive teams and extensive supplies. Sergey had only himself and the limited supplies he could carry. He planned to use the permanent camps established by previous expedition teams, and crucially, he did this without their permission. The initial descent was brutal beyond imagination. Sergey had to navigate well over 12,200 feet of narrow, tight cave passages, dragging his supplies through incredibly difficult squeezes. Each movement was a test of physical and mental strength. He reached the first camp at 1,250 feet, which served as the staging area for the Baba Pit, a massive 500-foot vertical drop with no ledges or stops. At the Baba Pit, Sergey made a critical error that would ultimately cost him his life. The pit required a rope descent using a complex friction rope system, which involved hand ascenders and foot stirrups for climbing back up. But Sergey forgot or miscalculated a crucial piece of equipment. He had no foot stirrups. This seemingly small oversight transformed his expedition from a challenging adventure to a potential death trap. Climbing a rope using only hand ascenders without foot support is essentially impossible. Each attempt would exhaust him further, making escape increasingly unlikely. Sergey spent 6 or 7 days at Camp 2, located 2,000 feet deep. During this time, he likely realized the horrifying impossibility of climbing back to the surface. His supplies were dwindling, his hope was fading, and the cave was becoming his potential tomb. Desperate, he made the fatal decision to descend even further into the cave. At Camp 3, located 3,300 feet below the surface, he found no additional supplies to help him. The environment was nothing short of brutal. 100% humidity, constant water, and temperatures hovering over 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Wearing only cotton overalls and without a proper dry suit, Sergey was experiencing mild hypothermia. To prevent his body temperature from dropping further, he had to keep moving, but he was exhausted with no food to provide energy, trapped in a dark, cold, unforgiving underground world. The exact details of Sergey's final descent remain a mystery. Experts believe he likely succumbed to hypothermia or possibly fell in his weakened state. 9 months after his expedition began, the Prova Speleo team discovered his body hanging from the ropes at the 3,600-foot mark. The recovery process was as challenging and gruesome as the expedition itself, due to the cave's incredibly tight passages. The team had to dismember his body to transport it out, a process that required over 100 people and special permission. Sergey's story is a stark and heartbreaking reminder of the dangers of solo expeditions in extreme environments. His adventure highlights critical mistakes that cannot be ignored. Number 1, no proper preparation for the expedition. Number 2, lack of proper essential equipment. Number 3, no communication plan with the outside world. Number 4, attempting an incredibly dangerous expedition alone. Number 5, ignoring established professional safety protocols. While his journey ended in tragedy, there's something profound in Sergey's spirit of exploration, the fundamental human desire to go where others haven't, to challenge the impossible, to push beyond known limits.